Dr. Ameet has written many books and courses about healing the roots causes of mind and body issue. Hello, Ameet. It is a deep honor and pleasure to be here with you in conversation. I wanted to get started and ask like anxiety, depression, and mental health issues can stem from various physical, like and emotional sources, such as trauma or leaky gut. Like, can you explain how these conditions are interconnected and why understanding like these relationships are really effective for like healing and treatment and sort of having this abundant view on life?
Absolutely, Fabrice. So, hi everyone. We're going to cover homeopathy, family constellations therapy, trauma healing, gut health, liver detox, and herbs and naturopathic medicine for all these things. So, let's go slowly, one step at a time, right? So, emotional trauma, we often think of things that happen during childhood, right? Whether it's abuse, abandonment, neglect, parents fighting, alcoholism, or some addiction in the family system. These are all known as adverse childhood experiences. Okay. And they trigger a fight or flight response in our nervous system, particularly our adrenal glands. And when that happens, we produce more adrenaline and cortisol. And this trauma gets stuck in our nervous system. Even as adults, we have trauma that's stuck from childhood, and it's driving our nervous system into adulthood. All right. And so, as an adult, what's happening is your nervous system is already primed to be vulnerable and to be scared or to be defensive or to judge people in a certain way or to look at life in a certain way or to even judge yourself either negatively or positively or with false pride. We also carry ancestral trauma, and I'm going to cover that very soon from our grandparents, from abortions, miscarriages, from our parents' love affairs, from things that happened in the war for our parents, and for our grandparents. It's called ancestral trauma, and I'll
Mm.
talk about how we're going to heal that using family constellations therapy. Yeah. So stick with me at the end, and we're going to cover all those special healing sentences you can do to disentangle from family trauma. Now, let's go first to the biology, back to the biology, right? We've talked about stress and trauma affecting the adrenal system and the nervous system, producing adrenaline, cortisol.
Mm.
Let's go to the basics now. The gut and the liver. How does that affect mental health and chronic disease? So you have a stomach, you have intestines. Your intestines are like a nice tube, a nice lining, kept healthy by good bacteria and good food. Over time, with antibiotic use, poor diet, too much gluten, dairy, sugar, alcohol, coffee, you name it, these inflammatory foods, yeah? So each person is sensitive to certain types of foods. If we
Mm.
have too much of these and too many pesticides in the water and chemicals, also the birth control pill, all these things destroy the good bacteria and the gut lining, okay? And when they destroy the gut lining, we get holes in the intestine. It's known as leaky gut syndrome.
Mm.
And with leaky gut syndrome, then what happens is toxins leak into the bloodstream, and that causes inflammation everywhere in the body, leading cause for asthma, eczema, arthritis, a lot of chronic conditions. Okay. Now, the good bacteria in our gut that gets killed off, these good bacteria also produce most of our serotonin, GABA, and other neurotransmitters, our feel-good neurotransmitters. So when these pesticides and chemicals and inflammatory foods damage the gut lining and kill off the bacteria, then we're producing less neurotransmitters, right? Less serotonin, less GABA, less melatonin. And GABA is our anti anxiety neurotransmitter. So, of
Mm.
course, then we go into more anxiety and depression and OCD symptoms, suicidal thoughts, low self esteem because of the biological imbalance. Okay. Now, let's go back to the leaky gut, the toxins in the bloodstream, and the chronic inflammation everywhere in the body, causing the asthma, eczema, arthritis, a lot of chronic conditions, right? This inflammation also goes to the liver.
Mm.
And the liver is our master controller, the master organ. It controls everything in the body. It controls detoxification. It produces bile for digestion. Okay. It keeps the microbiome healthy. So everyone's taking probiotics and changing their diet, right? But they're not healing the liver. And it's a big mistake because the liver produces bile.
Mm.
And bile is the juice that keeps the intestines healthy. Bile is the juice that lubricates your intestines so that you can poop better. So a lot of people with constipation are making a huge mistake by only taking laxatives when most likely they have a deficiency in bile flow. So their livers are stagnant. That's what we call in Chinese medicine. And when you get the bile flowing, then you have less constipation and you're treating the root cause, which is super important. Now, because the liver is the master controller of all organs, in Chinese medicine, we see it controlling the hormones, so estrogen, progesterone, metabolism, okay?
Wow.
Iron storage, vitamin storage, amino acid synthesis, immune cell activation, B vitamin metabolism as well, okay? So when the liver becomes stagnant from chronic inflammation, one, okay, also from pesticides and toxins and too much alcohol and everything we're slamming it with, including excessive drugs, whether it's painkillers or whatever you're taking. I'm not saying you have to come off those, right? But just talk to your doctor and see how can you adjust your medication and treat the root cause. So when the liver becomes stagnant, all these functions that the liver does, it goes out of balance. So we go into hormonal imbalances. Yeah, typically what I see is estrogen dominance and progesterone deficiency, right? And then with that, you get PMS symptoms, right? PMS, that's breast tenderness, gas, bloating, cramping, clotting, right? You might get fibroids or ovarian cysts. That's often a combination of chronic inflammation and liver stagnation. And of course, emotional issues, which we're going to talk about shortly at the end of this interview, yeah? The ancestral trauma and family constellations therapy. So now we got this hormonal imbalance. Also, when progesterone drops, then GABA, the anti-anxiety neurotransmitter, doesn't work so well in the brain,
Mm.
right? And when it doesn't work, then you get more anxiety or insomnia. And that's why people with hormonal imbalances also have the mood swings because of the liver connection and the gut connection
Wow.
hormones. Okay. So you can understand how gut health, constipation, fibroids, cysts, mental health issues are all interconnected now. Yeah. The body affects the mind affects the body. So now we got all this inflammation. And also, one thing I need to mention is 70% of your thyroid hormones are actually activated in your liver. So if your
Wow.
liver is stagnant, yeah. So if your liver is stagnant, you're not going to activate T4 to T3. So most people, they're taking thyroid medications, they're doing all these hormone replacement things, but they're not healing the liver,
Mm.
right? And so you have subclinical hypothyroidism. So your T4 levels might be fine, your TSH levels might look fine, but your active T3 is low.
Wow.
And people don't know why. Often it's due to liver stagnation or cortisol imbalance, which we're going to talk about right now. What do I mean by cortisol imbalance? So we got this stress and trauma from childhood, yeah, stressing your nervous system, yeah, and that burns out your adrenal glands,
Mm.
all right? Also, what happens is all this inflammation also stresses your adrenal glands to make cortisol because cortisol helps to manage inflammation. But what happens is too much stress, too much inflammation then burns out your adrenal glands and you go into a cortisol imbalance. And when you go into a cortisol imbalance, that suppresses serotonin, dopamine, GABA, melatonin, all your feel good neurotransmitters.
Wow.
It also suppresses T4 to T3 thyroid hormone activation. So now you're also going into mental health symptoms, anxiety, depression, OCD, suicidal thoughts from adrenal burnout combined with leaky gut syndrome and chronic inflammation and liver toxicity. So most people are struggling with taking this medication or healing their gut, etc. But if you look at my online course, we go through a very systematic approach of healing emotional trauma through beautiful, simple exercises that I give you in the course, then healing the gut. And often we'll use probiotics. Vitamin D is excellent to reduce inflammation and heal the gut lining. I use amino acids, including glutamine, which is basically a very powerful amino acid to repair the gut lining. But don't use that if you have bipolar or any other strong psychiatric disorder because that can aggravate those symptoms, yeah, just for people to be aware of. Then I cover other remedies in the course. So that's healing the gut. So heal trauma, healing the gut. The other foundation is the liver, like we talked about. And that's why we got to use like milk thistle, dandelion, bitter foods. These are all
Mm.
gut or liver healing foods because we want that bile flowing. We want to rejuvenate the liver so that your
Mm.
hormones come into balance, your
Mm.
gut microbiome becomes healthy. Because taking probiotics alone and change your diet is not going to help if you don't have good bile flow. Okay,
Mm.
and cover other homeopathic remedies as well in the course to detox your liver at a deeper level. Because I find herbal remedies like milk thistle, dandelion root, artichoke leaf, those are excellent for healing your liver. But homeopathy, which we'll talk about shortly, is an energetic form of medicine which detoxifies the liver at a much deeper level, at a cellular level. Yeah. so that the herbs work better, the lymphatic system drains better when you introduce homeopathy to any herbal protocol.
That
Okay.
that's incredibly revolutionary, everything you're saying, because it almost feels like, at least from here in the West, at least from my perspective, it seems like there isn't necessarily a lot of attention to these causes. And I love how you're sort of breaking down like the biological, but also the intergenerational trauma as being so tied to this sort of like we're always so riled up, and we have these triggers that releases these very biological implications. I
Yes.
remember I think this was a synchronicity. I was talking to this woman who said that she had problems for over like 30 years, chronic pain, and then she changed her diet and did the whole like probiotics and that process, and she was like literally over 2 days everything, her life changed, and she was like smiling, she was happy. And it's funny that we're having this conversation today, because I feel like what you're saying is incredibly important. Like, so how do you like, what does it look like when you employ like personal healing and ancestral trauma? Like, why do you think going at these two things are important for like a more holistic vision of healing, as opposed to other methods that exist? Because I feel like that is so important in our times today, because people are walking and think that the type of healing that they might want to get is like more of a traditional vision, but what they don't know is like that there's a whole ecosystem, like you're saying, in the gut.
Absolutely. So, healing the biology is super important, as we've seen, healing the gut and the liver and the adrenal glands. So, in the course, I also cover adaptogenic herbs. Adaptogenic herbs are herbs that support the adrenal glands because they're completely burnt out, right? So,
Mm,
things like ashwagandha or rhodiola, those are all covered in the course to help rebalance that. And we've gone through some gut healing protocols. And you can see how supporting that then stabilizes inflammation,
mm,
yeah, stabilizes cortisol levels, and therefore the neurotransmitters come into balance, and also chronic disease disappears. Yeah, I've seen significant weight loss with a lot of weight loss clients by
mm,
healing the liver, the gut, and the adrenal glands together. Yeah, huge changes. Now back to your question, why is it important to heal personal trauma as well as ancestral trauma? Yeah. So personal trauma, of course, the trauma lives in our body. So when you're a child and you get scolded at or abused, or your parents are fighting, etc., your nervous system is primed and fearful and watchful and on guard. And as an adult, if these traumas are unhealed, then what happens is when you're faced with stress, these responses, these traumatic responses that you had as a child get re-triggered, and
mm,
you go into overwhelm much faster, or you burn out your nervous system much faster because of this unhealed trauma driving your nervous system. So you might even just see an angry person where, and you get triggered by that, versus somebody else who sees the angry person might think, oh, he's angry, it's not my fault.
mm,
Yeah, each of us responds differently. Okay. And now let's get to ancestral trauma and family constellations, my favorite topic. Yeah. So, family constellations therapy was developed by Bert Hellinger. Yeah. A German Jesuit priest who spent time in South Africa with the Zulu people. And he noticed that the Zulu people had certain orders of love or certain traditions that they respected. And he called these the orders of love. Yeah. And when we disrespect these, then disease sets in, or anxiety sets in, or dysfunction sets in relationships, in financial issues, in abundance, in just everything that you can imagine in life. What does this all mean? Let me simplify it. Okay.
mm,
So, for example, I had a client who had a gastrinoma, yes, stomach cancer. Tumor markers were over 4,000. And when she came in, I asked her, okay, what happened before the diagnosis? What happens 3 to 6 months before that? And she broke down crying. Yeah. She's like, gosh, how did you know? I was like, yeah, what happened? Something's there. And she says, yeah, I found out my father had an affair. And I was so upset and I couldn't swallow it. I couldn't digest it. One. And then what I noticed is she was protecting her mother and rejecting her father.
mm,
I'm going to explain why all this is relevant shortly. By rejecting her father, okay, she has a conflict with one source of life. Her father gave her life. Then protecting her mother, she was basically overpowering her mother. She was becoming the parent to her own mother.
wow.
So this dynamic creates an internal conflict, okay? And we did healing sentences. It's hard to believe, but we did certain healing sentences. I'll teach you how to do these. Within 3 to 6 months, the tumor markers dropped from 4,000 down to below 1,000 very quickly. Okay. Now, why is this all relevant? Let's go into the orders of love and family constellations therapy. Okay. So Bert Hellinger noticed that the first order of love is everyone has a right to belong. What does that mean? Sometimes when there's miscarriages or abortions, we don't talk about those children. Okay. Or there's a black sheep in the family, or an alcoholic uncle, or a secret, or, like people who we don't mention, or people who died very early. They're forgotten and not talked about.
Mm,
However, they belong to our family system. Yeah. And when we don't talk about them and honor them in the right way, basically other people in the family start representing these missing people
mm,
through symptoms, through habits, through behaviors. Okay. So, for example, I had a client, and I'm going to explain the stomach cancer very shortly about that and hierarchy, but related to everyone belonging, for example, I had a client with chronic anxiety, and we did homeopathy with it, Gestalt psychotherapy, we did everything under the sun, and the anxiety remained. Then I asked her, okay, gosh, ask your mother if there was a miscarriage or abortion in the family. She was surprised. She went home, she asked her mother, dear mom, was there something? And her mom was like, gosh, how did you know? It's true, there was a miscarriage. She had a miscarriage. So the
wow.
client came back and told me there was a miscarriage. How did you know? I was like, I could just feel it. And, this happens in constellation therapy. So then I said, okay, let us acknowledge that child. Okay. How do we acknowledge missing people? One is we give them a place in the family. So I said, okay, look at your parents. Imagine both of your parents in front of you. Then this child came before you, correct? She was like, yes. I said, imagine this child coming before you so that you are in the second position in the family. This is another order of love called the order of hierarchy. Yeah.
Mm,
First, we're including this missing child, so everyone has a right to belong. Yeah. By just seeing this child in front of her and saying, dear mom and dad, I am the second. This child is the first. Please look at me as the second. And then I asked her to speak to this representative of the missing sibling and saying, dear sibling, dear brother, dear sister, I come second, you were first. I give you a place in my heart. Okay, Fabrice, literally the anxiety just peeled away because she could feel her correct position. She
mm,
could feel that she's in second position and doesn't have to fulfill the role of a first child. This sounds very woo-woo, but I promise you, most chronic conditions can be healed using, of course, a combination of what we've talked about, but family constellations therapy often addresses the root cause because it's actually coming from a systemic trauma.
absolutely. It's
Okay?
it's almost as if it's like the sort of epigenetics, like sort of realm of how, like, because yeah, trauma is passed down through our genetics and our DNA and our biology. And I think that
Exactly.
level of vibration and like being in tune with that, because I think oftentimes we tend to forego like these like traditional indigenous practices, but a lot of the wisdom that they have stems from thousands of years. And it's like our sort of ways of healing is very recent and very modern, and it's very kind of sort of centered around a certain logic. So I feel like that what you're saying is incredibly, like incredibly powerful.
It's super important, right? So I had another client with shoulder pain, chronic shoulder pain, and she was doing physiotherapy, etc., and homeopathy as well. And then finally we tuned in and I asked her again about a miscarriage or abortion. And she started crying. She was like, Amit, how do you know? My mom lost a child.
Mm,
Yeah. And so what happens is we notice as human beings, we carry the sorrow or pain of our parents. That's very common. Yeah. If your mom is abused or your dad is, lost a job or something, we will carry their pain for them. We feel sad for them. We take on responsibility. All right. And so for this client, she was basically take on the grief of her mother for this missing child.
wow.
So another healing sentence those of you listening can experiment with is if you think you've taken on something that belongs to another person, like the emotions of your mother, your father, your siblings, you can say, dear mom, dear dad, I respect you very much, and please bless me if I give this back to you. I have my own grief for this missing child, and I see that you are big enough. Yeah, you're the big one, I'm the child. I see you're big enough to kind of process this in your own powerful way. Yeah, I'm only the child, and I cannot take this grief away from you because it's unfair to you and it's almost demeaning or diminishing to you as an adult to do this with you.
I love that.
Yeah. And so this is the also the order of balance of giving and taking. Yeah. So parents generally give to children, and children pass on life to either by doing good things in life or having more children. Right. And also this looks at the order of hierarchy. Parents come first, right? And then we are children underneath them. And if suddenly if we take on the grief that belongs to parents or the burden of a parent, then we will feel this over responsibility, this depression, this sadness. Yeah. Often I find a lot of people in dysfunctional relationships or who are alone and cannot find a relationship is because they're entangled or attached to their parents' sorrow and
Mm.
problems and grief. And they don't have permission in their hearts to move on.
It's almost as if it's almost as if it's like a soul contract. And you're sort of
Exactly this.
you're talking on a soul level, soul to soul level, because it's like when we all come into this world and this reality, there are different sort of forces and karmic sort of teachings that we are imbued with. And I think being able to kind of have that conversation in a soul to soul level, like by
Yeah.
yourself and in conversation, I think unleashes a lot of energy that perhaps that hasn't been integrated or processed or released. So I feel like the everything you're saying is extremely powerful. Like I'm wondering also, like when you have these sort of holistic approaches to mental health, it encompasses so many wide modalities because you talked about like homeopathic, naturopathic, like psychotherapy, family constellation. And how do you integrate all of these modalities, and how do you sort of like understand the situation into which and the culture into which the person is 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 experiencing, to see because I know you gave a few examples, but like how do you integrate all of these in a very holistic way? And what are the opportunities and challenges for that?
Good question, Fabrice. So on my website, there's some free videos to how to heal the gut, to simplify healing the gut, the liver, the adrenal system, and a beautiful emotional healing exercise. Okay. So I start with the basics for every client. Yeah. I look at their digestion. Do they have inflammatory conditions like arthritis, eczema, etc.? Do they have a hormonal imbalance? Likely they have leaky gut or liver toxicity.
Mm,
And then, yeah, so we'll heal that with the remedies that I mentioned in the course. Then I'll see, have they had a strong history of trauma? Are they burnt out? Do they need adrenal support? Then we'll add some adaptogens as well. But first, we got to clean out the system by reducing inflammation, changing the diet, and of course, healing the liver, yeah, detoxifying the liver. When the toxicity is out, when the inflammation is down, then you can rebuild the adrenal system.
mm,
As we're doing this, I'll always ask about their emotional history. Were you born? How was childhood for you? Were your parents fighting? Any missing children? And in family constellations therapy, because I combine Gestalt therapy and family constellations, so I'm very sensitive to vibrations and the
mm.
field. So at the retreats that I do in Kenya, and we're doing some in Costa Rica and Peru and Sardinia and
Wow.
Greece actually, and Greece as well. Everyone's welcome to come to these. Um, I will feel into the person's ancestral field and biological field. Yeah, so we get information from the field and we can feel, this is related to something about a missing child. Yeah, or mom was abused,
Mm,
or maybe dad was an alcoholic, or parents fought in World War II, or victims of, the Holocaust. All this comes up. And
yeah.
also, people know something about their family history. Then I have this beautiful questionnaire that everyone gets at the retreats, and they fill it out, and we go through, yeah, their family history, and we can see where there's chances of entanglements happening, right? We also do a lot of trauma healing exercises. So I'll combine Gestalt therapy, EMDR, somatic experiencing, you know, all the visceral, I would say sensitive trauma therapies. I like those ones because they create an organic change for the person and are more transformative than analytical therapies. So when you come to these retreats, you go through, a huge biological transformation by healing energetic influences, ancestral
Mm.
traumas or childhood traumas that are influencing your physiology. So that's how I really integrate things. We start with the basics, yeah, the gut, the liver, the adrenal stuff, simple emotional healing exercises that you get in the course as well. And then we go deeper into looking at family constellations. I also have a course on family constellations therapy where people can learn the healing sentences for particular situations in people's lives, basically.
That's incredible. Like, what is that shift that happens for people? Because I think you almost require an inner shift because it's like me. I always say meaning is magic, and it's like
Mhm.
sometimes we get in the way of our own selves, and then maybe we're so sort of ingrained in a certain timeline that now we're not welcoming the wisdom of the body, the wisdom of sort of the soul. Like, how do do you see a lot of people perhaps that comes in with perhaps they're not fully convinced, or maybe they don't know it's gonna work, or maybe they've already fatalized their lives that they're gonna have this forever. Like, or like, how does that
Yeah,
shift happens for them? Like that psychic shift to be like, okay, I believe this is a possibility, and healing
yeah.
is something for me.
So first of all, it's important to honor the resistance. Yeah, any resistance the client has is a useful tool because they're protecting themselves, they're protecting their vulnerability, and they're protecting what they know. And we need to acknowledge that because that's your safety place, that's your safety zone. And I want to make sure you're feeling safe every step of the way, right? And as you feel safe, then you might be open to the basics, the healing the gut, the liver, adrenals, etc. And as you're feeling safe, I'll invite you to just do a bit of tapping, for example,
Mm,
right? And we'll talk about a memory and we'll do some tapping. So the tapping is based on EMDR therapy or trauma release technique. And right there in the session, whether it's online or physical or at a retreat, people will start to feel a relaxation or a letting go of the trauma, yeah, of the stress response. And there they'll gain a trust. There'll be a level of trust that's happening in their nervous system, in their biology. They're like, okay, this actually feels good. I'm willing to tap a bit more.
mm,
They'll say, great. Now, what does it feel like to think about your mother or your
mm,
father or your sister?
mm,
And they'll notice a response in their body. Oh, I feel love, or I feel a bit of tension. I feel a bit of mistrust. I feel a bit of fear, maybe, or, disappointment. I'll say, great. What does it feel like to honor those feelings in this moment? Right? And just by giving a chance to honor those feelings opens up the space for deeper work. Because now you're in the work, you're in the process of, you know, feeling the emotions and working with the emotions, not making them go away, because every emotion is useful. It has biological purpose. They're
mm,
protecting us, they're giving us information, they're helping us adjust to the environment, they're helping us fit in or belong. So in family constellations, we often talk about the need to belong. So we carry the burdens of our parents or the sadness in order to belong to the family system.
mm,
We're angry at the uncle who was mean because the parents were angry, or I'm angry at my dad who abused my mom because I want to belong to my mom. I want to keep a sense of belonging in the family. And in my family, there's anger at the father for being abusive or whatever, for example. So I'll take on these behaviors in order to retain the sense of belonging. So we honor these emotions. We never make them wrong. We say, how is it to live like this? Just notice how much energy that you're using to continue this feelings and behavior on behalf of your mom.
wow.
And they become aware. So it's like, gosh, this is costing me a lot, you know? And is there an alternative? I'll say, well, check in. What could the, I never suggest anything forceful. It's like, is there an alternative? Could it be, dear mom, please give me permission. This is what we did with the gastronoma patient, the stomach cancer. Dear mom, please give me permission. Please bless me. If I look at dad as an equal parent, please forgive me if I, include him as a parent again. Please forgive me if I look at him with love once again. And that's a big risk for people. Yeah, when there's been betrayal and abuse in the family.
Wow.
And you could say to dad, dear dad, you know, please, please bless me if I look at you as a dad again. It's costing me my life to ignore you or to reject you. It's costing me my life to judge what you've been doing. Yeah, really acknowledging what it's costing you and what it's doing to your body. So these healing sentences unleash immense potential to heal. Yeah, it unleashes every single thing in your nervous system because you're releasing trauma. You're speaking out words of love. Yeah, so at the healing retreats I do, I often call it healing with love.
Mm,
Yeah, because you're acknowledging what truly is. Dear mom, it's costing me my life to carry your pain, yeah, and your disappointment with dad. Dear dad, it hurts me what you did, and at the same time, you're still my father,
mm.
and I see that. Yeah, you gave me life, and I can't push that away anymore. I'm not
Wow.
saying you have to agree with what your dad did, but it's acknowledging that, he is a source of life and you belong in this system. So that's the power of constellation work. Yeah, and there's free videos on my website to teach you how to integrate homeopathy, family constellations, trauma healing, and
Mm.
of course, healing your gut, your liver, and adrenal system with herbs.
I think that's so incredible, and I'm seeing myself transform as you're speaking right now. So it's
Feel it.
incredibly powerful what you're saying because it's almost as if it's like you're accessing like different self-initiations and different gates of healing where you have more presence, more being, more abundance, more light. And I think
Absolutely.
like there's these types of inner work almost forces us to confront a lot of pain and suffering. And I'm wondering because I think this confrontation with pain for suffering and for the audience, I feel like some people are asking like, what I'm hearing is almost as this fear that like that we and I know that you said you have like a sort of we all emotions are sacred and we create space for them to unfold and teach us the wisdom that they have. But
Hmm.
I feel like sometimes the complexity of change and healing and transformation often is imbued in like sort of the simplicity of like, okay, there's a lot of fear, so fear almost tells us that we're not gonna move. And I'm kind of going back to this sort of resistance because I think
Hmm.
that a lot of the times people maybe feel so uncomfortable to move in that direction because they know that what they're going to be faced is they're going to be confronted with these Pandora box.
Yes
And
and no. Yes and no, Fabrice. The fear is often because they haven't experienced the right kind of support. Yeah. If I say welcome the fear and the uncertainty, how do you
mm,
feel about that? And just let's honor the uncertainty because you don't know what's next or you don't know what this will look like. That's acknowledgement.
mm,
Yeah. When we acknowledge the vulnerability that each one of us has, then there's trust or a sense of, how do I say it, synergy between me and the client. And that sense of synergy then dispels a bit of the fear.
mm,
Yeah. The problem that most people experience is they might feel rushed in therapy. They might feel that they have to get to a certain place, a forgiveness or a positive feeling or a vibe. Absolutely not. That's making everything else you're feeling very wrong, right? And that's unfair to your inner child. That's
mm,
unfair to your nervous system.
mm,
Yeah, each part needs to be acknowledged and given a space to be fully felt. And
mm.
that's when the pure love then can emerge.
For individuals beginning their journey towards healing and resilience, like what steps do you recommend someone looking to address like trauma, anxiety, depression, to like these holistic methods that you advocate? And I know you've spoken to a few of them. Like someone who's like the ultimate beginner, like
Mm.
what can they do
Yeah.
like they?
Okay. First of all, start with the free videos that I have on my website, right? It's drameet.com, drameet.com. That will really simplify healing the gut, the liver, the adrenal system, and there's a beautiful emotional healing exercise to create safety for your own emotions and feelings. Yeah, so you become less judgmental about yourself. Okay,
Mm,
and the full online course covers more deeper protocols of healing the gut, the liver, and the adrenals with herbs and homeopathy, and more emotional healing exercises. That's the best step because often people will only heal their gut without healing the emotions,
mm,
or they'll only go for therapy without healing the biology. So they're
mm,
stuck in this vicious cycle. So I like people to integrate body healing and mind healing to really get to the root cause and free themselves from pain, from anxiety, depression, discomfort, etc. Yeah. And then I would say see a therapist who does either Gestalt or EMDR or family constellations. I combine all of them because I like combining them because family constellations brings to awareness what's happening, right? And it releases a lot of pain and suffering. And then the EMDR helps with like either eye movement or tapping techniques that releases the trauma a bit deeper from the nervous system. And then the Gestalt helps me become super sensitive to people's emotions and their nervous system as well. Yeah. So find somebody who can combine those. Yeah. And maybe also come to one of the retreats that we do either in Peru, Costa Rica, Sardinia, Greece. There'll be probably one in Canada and definitely in Kenya. So in Kenya, we combine it with safaris, with beach time. And when
Mm.
you're healing next to the animals, or you do a healing retreat and then go on safari, or vice versa, it's a whole different experience. Yeah. But back to your question, start with the basics. Yeah. Look at your biology, remove inflammatory foods. Are you sensitive to gluten, dairy, um, tomatoes, the nightshade families, or beef? Beef is very inflammatory. People don't realize that. A lot of people are saying eat grass-fed beef or natural beef, but what I found for most of my clients, when they remove beef from their diet, among with other inflammatory foods, their healing happens so much faster.
Yeah, and I feel like it's like it's a whole yeah, I remember the first time I thought about like how your gut biome impacts your psychology and I feel like that is a really clear step like a lot of people can take to make that like process. Um I also wanted to ask like a personal question as well. Like how did you get
Mhm.
into this flow? We're nearing the end of the interview
Okay.
and but I would love to hear like your journey. Like how did you sort of step into that world to be a healer, and kind of expand in those realms.
So I grew up in Africa and in Kenya in particular, where I am right now. And we grew up, well, getting beaten by teachers. That was normal. Caning was normal. So there's a lot of trauma. I also grew up in boarding school. So bullied a lot, abandonment from parents, etc. So I carried a lot of trauma. And then I could feel things in people. I just naturally feel things, what's happening in somebody's heart and somebody's mind. And that's what makes these retreats so powerful. So, anyways, I went to Canada. I studied naturopathic medicine using the herbs, the homeopathy, etc. But it wasn't necessarily healing everything. And then I stepped into Gestalt therapy and family constellations. And that's where healing the root cause started happening, right? Because we're healing emotional trauma that's affecting the biology, right? And like you've seen, stomach cancer reducing, shoulder pain, chronic anxiety, physical problems I see can be healed using emotional healing, using the trauma therapy or family constellations. So that's really a summary of my healing journey. I also did a lot of drugs during my teenage years, from cannabis to LSD to etc. And I used homeopathy to detoxify the after effects of these drugs. And homeopathy works amazingly well to detoxify from drug abuse as well. So combining emotional healing with homeopathy and of course the liver gut protocols, I became so much more resilient, you know, um, just stronger. I hold retreats around the world. I speak publicly. I could never speak in front of a classroom, you know. And so my healing journey was that of a lot of pain and sorrow and, gas issues, bloating issues, digestive issues, acne, weakness, fatigue, and of course, mental health issues, including suicidal thoughts. I've been through it. Yeah. And by looking at the emotional traumas as well as the biology, symptoms started disappearing. Yeah. Because it's important to heal the biology and the trauma together. Yeah. When you heal the root cause, then healing lasts much longer. You need less supplements, less medications over time.
Thank you so much. I feel like that is such a there's a wealth of wisdom there for like this path of healing that a lot of people might not even begin to comprehend. Dr. Ameet Agarwal, this has been such a deep pleasure to be with us today. How can people find out more about your work? And I know you mentioned the website. Um,
So there's a free course, first of all. It's on drameet.com, draneet.com. Then the website for the retreats is all there. We do corporate wellness workshops as well, team building workshops. There's a full online course where people will learn my exact protocols and emotional healing exercises as well. And then there's lots of books there as well that people can read up on. So it's a full journey.